Hey friends, welcome back to my channel. It's Tori. Today I am going to be giving you my September wrap-up. So September was a little bit of a slower month in terms of reading just because I have been really focusing on getting the last editing phases and all of the things together for my book release at the end of November. If you don't already know, my book, The Bloodstones, which is book 1 in the Legends of the Bruhai trilogy, will be coming out on November 28th. I officially announced that this last month. At the heart of it, I am just so thrilled and so ready for this book to be out in the world and for you guys to all read it if you so choose, and I'm just glad to finally be at this point and to see it taking its first steps into the world. That's very exciting. If you are interested in updates on the release of Bloodstones and all of the things leading up to it, definitely go down in the description box below and check out my website, which has a link to my email newsletter. Moving on to the books that I read in the month of September. So I had a really good reading month this month. I am so excited to finally be able to say that I have read Jade City by Fonda Lee, and you can check out my vlog for that up here. I've been wanting to read the Greenbone Saga for so long, and I'm so glad that I finally started it. I'm very excited to move into book 2 coming up here in October. So the first book that I read in the month of September was The Thief Who Pulled on Trouble's Braids by Michael McClung. Now this book is pretty short. It's only about 210 pages. So this book is actually the winner of the first ever self-published fantasy blog off, which is still going on to this day. We are on Spiffbo 9 this year, which is crazy. My book Phased is in it. You can go check out my informational video on that if you want to learn more about Spiffbo. But this book was the first ever winner, and I have been wanting to read the winners of Spiffbo for a while, and so on a whim I picked this one up to start with, and I really had a blast with this story. So basic gist of the story is it's kind of this blend of fantasy and murder mystery and horror, and it was just so fast-paced. I was amazed at how much story and twists and gut punches were packed into 210 pages. And I'm always very impressed by authors who can do that, because that's, in a fantasy world, not actually that much space. So Amra Thetis is our main character, and she is a thief who gets wrapped up in a lot of trouble when she comes across a murder of someone that she knows. She takes on a vow of revenge and gets drawn very quickly into a world of magic that she was not prepared for. The antagonists of the story and the murder mystery and the magic system kind of tied up in all of this deals a lot with dark and blood magic, and that's where a lot of the horror aspects of this world come in. There are definitely some very grimdark moments in this story. Amra's telling the story from a first-person point of view, and so we are in her head the entire time throughout the story, and I definitely think that writing first-person narration can be very difficult because it's easy to kind of fall into a Mary Sue, Gary Stu kind of situation where you're just either kind of in the head of this character who could be anyone, or it's a character that's so obnoxious that you don't want to keep reading the book. And what I loved about this story is that in this particular case, I think that the first-person narration was used incredibly well. Amra was just enough savage, just enough, like, flawed and brave and sometimes reckless, that she was a very nuanced first-person narrator, and I really, really enjoyed that. I had a blast. I sped through this book. I had a great time with it, and I'm hoping to do a more thorough video review of it in the near future. The second book I read this month was another Spiffbo book, and it is actually a contestant this year in Spiffbo 9, and that is The Werewolf of Whitechapel by Susanna Roundtree. This book was actually chosen as a semi-finalist finalist this year, so big congratulations to Susanna for that. And I was intrigued because as someone who also has written a book with werewolves in it, I was immediately interested to check out some of there's a couple other books in the competition that had werewolves as a feature in the story, and I always love seeing what other people choose to do with those more kind of supernatural mythical creature characters. I was expecting maybe a little bit more of a heavy slant toward romance, which there is a romance in the story, but it actually kind of took a backseat to a lot of the other elements, and I really appreciated that. So this book takes place in our world. It is kind of a fantasized version of London. We have things like the Scotland Yard, we have, abbeys, we have the Queen of England. So a lot of those things are pulled from history. Our main character in the story is Liz Sharp, and she is the victim of some kind of werewolf attack. She has scars on her face, but the twist is she doesn't remember anything about her life prior to waking up after the attack. There are dangerous people and creatures on the loose that are responsible for some horrific murders going on, and she is on a very determined mission to expose what's really going on and some of the kind of darker sides of the nobility in her world that she thinks might be behind it. I actually liked Liz as a main character. There were some moments where I felt like I would have liked to see the story from someone else's perspective, but overall I thought that she did a really good job kind of building the tension within the murder mystery. She really did a good job tying in the historical elements to it. I really liked a lot of the way that she kind of assimilated that idea of werewolves and vampires into the historical London setting. So overall, I had a really good time with it. I can definitely see why this book was chosen as a semi-finalist this year in SPIFBO, and I really had a good time with it. Next up, Jade City by Fonda Lee. Once again, I do have a vlog for my experience reading this book. And I definitely will be doing a review of the trilogy once I am done with it. And I was not disappointed. I was promised a lot of things going into this trilogy by friends that have read it, and I was not disappointed. This book is an urban fantasy, Asian-inspired, and very focused around mafia and gang families. I'm still kind of gathering my thoughts in this, and I have, again, in the vlog, more of a step-by-step opinion of how I went through the book. But what I loved so much about Jade City is the family dynamics of this book are some of the best I have read in a really long time. I was invested very quickly. I loved the magic system. I thought it was just enough and the perfect balance within that urban fantasy world, and it didn't take away from the characters and that family dynamic that I was really loving. The characters, usually I find a character or maybe two characters in a book like this that I really gravitate towards and I'm excited to read whenever they come up on the page. In this book, there was really only one character that I didn't want to read, and that wasn't Fonda Lee's fault. That was just the character is kind of universally hated by pretty much everybody I've talked to. So other than that, each chapter and each character was so immersive and compelling. I absolutely loved them all. I will definitely be continuing the series with Jade War here coming up in October, and I'm very excited about that. We're doing a read-along on my channel right now for this trilogy, so if you have read them before or if you want to jump in and catch up, feel free to do that. I will put the announcement video up here so you can go check that out for details. But we've been having really amazing conversations about it in my Patreon Discord, and it's just been an absolute blast so far. After reading Jade City, I picked up The Way of Adan by my friend and fellow booktuber Philip Chase, Dr. Fantasy himself. Now, when I went into this, I was expecting a very kind of a love letter to classic sagas and fantasy, and I was not disappointed. So this book takes place in a fantasy world where there is a holy war beginning, and Philip uses multiple POVs to kind of bring you into the perspective of that holy war from different characters on different sides. This book definitely does not shy away from the heavy themes, and there were definitely a few moments where it felt a little closer to real world history, which sometimes for me can be a little bit of a tricky balance as a reader. Overall, I had a really good time with this book. I love that Philip included so much of the passion he has for the craft of fantasy as a written genre, and also the history background that he has. In this book, there's a lot of really cool world building that happens within the story. He definitely brings in some of the classic fantasy races that we all know and love, and I am really looking forward to seeing what the next installment of the trilogy looks like. The last book that I finished in the month of September was NPCs by Drew Hayes. This is a book about a group of NPCs at a tavern, and the adventurers of the quest come in and don't survive. And all of a sudden, it falls to these 4 NPC characters to take up the mantle of adventurer and continue the quest. And there's a lot of kind of trial and error along the way as they try to figure out what role they all play in this. Which one is the paladin? Which one's the wizard? Which one's the barbarian? And they kind of have to do a little bit of shuffling before they actually figure out what they're all good at. There's some really cool concepts in this book, and I loved how Drew Hayes was really kind of pulling the curtain down between the reality world of the players and the world of the characters within the game or the quest. For anybody who is a Dungeons and Dragons fan, anybody who's played video games, fantasy video games in particular, this is definitely a book that's going to hit that nerd nostalgia really hard. It was a fun read. I blew right through it. Overall, I would have liked to see a little bit more character depth, but as a whole, this was a very fun read, and I have now had my first experience reading a book by Drew Hayes, and there are several other books on my TBR by him that I'm really looking forward to reading. So you guys are probably wondering, if you've been keeping up with my previous TBRs and ideas of what I was going to be reading this month, that Fool's Hope by Mike Shackle was not on the list of books that I finished in September. And originally that was the idea. I'm buddy reading this book with my friend John Morrow from Grimdark Magazine, and we are having an absolute blast with this series. As you can see, I'm about halfway through it, so it will show up in my October wrap-up, and John and I will definitely be doing another live stream talking about book 2, so keep an eye out for that. But it is in progress, and I'm really loving it so far, and I'm just really blown away by Mike Shackle's work so far. I think it's an excellent representation of grimdark. For me personally, I think it's going to end up being kind of a standard for grimdark. So that was my reading month for September. Going forward, if you didn't see my I'm Ditching TBRs video that I posted last week, I'm ditching TBRs. I will not be doing TBR videos at the beginning of each month. I'm going to be really leaning into the mood reading life, and I'm really looking forward to that. And I'm excited for the time and space I think that it's going to free up for me to do deeper content and some projects that I've been pushing off and throwing on the back burner for a long time that I think are finally going to get a chance to see some spotlight. So very excited for that. I would love to know down in the comments below, let me know what your favorite read of this month was. What books did you read this month? Did you have any 5-star reads? Did you have any that maybe were different than you were expecting or disappointing? Let me know down in the comments. I want to know how your reading month went, and I look forward to checking that out and having a chat with you guys about it. Other than that, I hope you are all having a fabulous week. I hope you are all reading 5-star reads, and I will see you in the next video.